I guess it mostly kind of just started with like sounds around the house. Like we'd be sitting in my bedroom and hear scratches on the walls, like from all the directions, and what sounded like someone walking above my room or footsteps down the hallway, like all that stuff is pretty much how it started. Tried to pass it off as other stuff for a while, but it wasn't. It just kept persisting, and it didn't take long to realize what was actually going on. And I always had gotten a vision of what he would look like. Like I never saw him in front of my eyes to like be like, oh, I've seen him, I know what he looks like. But I always like imagined, I had this thought in my head of like what he looked like in my imagination, and it was like 1800s, like tall dude with like the coat down to the floor, like really nice clothes, the bowler hat, and like a walking stick and that whole thing. Like he was like a wealthy man back in that time is like the image that I always got of him. And I never had any validation to that because like I said, it was all just in my head until one day he got the exact same image of him in the house. And that was when you had your experience with the picture.
Saw something. I was like some tall fucker behind me, and I was like, he was like behind me, and then yeah, the hat came up because I was like, he's like got a coat and then like a hat, and I was like, it's like a top hat, but not a top hat.
Yeah, and that's when I realized that you had the same exact image that I did, and I never even told you what he looked like before then.
Yeah, because before I said it, you corrected it, and you're like, well, you were gonna say, and I was like, well, it's not like a top hat. It's like one of those like round, short, small top hats. A bowler hat.
That's what I don't even know if that's what it's actually called.
I don't either.
That's just what I call it. It looks like it.
Tiny top hat.
Yep, that's the one.
Yeah, and then I got really sick.
Yeah, we had to go to a hair appointment of his right after that, and we're sitting in the waiting room, and he just looked like, I think I even told you that you looked dead, and you were like, well, what do you mean? And he was like this like pale yellowy color to the skin, like dark circles under the eyes, and he just looked sick. And this was like less than an hour after him getting the image and the reflection of the picture across from him and standing behind him. And so, yeah, weren't here, but my friend Dominique had came over with me, and my family was out with my cousins that were here visiting. It was really late at night, way later than they would normally be out, but we're sitting in my room watching a movie or whatever, and we start hearing the sounds, like all the stuff that we hear. And at first, I had always told her stories about what went on here, but she never got to witness it, so it was all just in her imagination of what I was giving her. But then she started to hear the stuff too, and she kept looking at me and like saying my name like I was supposed to do something about it. And I'm like, I don't know what you want me to do, girl. Like, I live here, it's here, that's what I've been telling you about. And we went at one point to go get on the computer, which was in the back room, which I will get into detail about that room. And the door was closed and the light was off. You could see it under the thing, and it was locked. My parents keep stuff that I'm not going to name in there, which is, I'm assuming, why they locked the door, because my cousins weren't here. Made sense, whatever. We just went back to my room. And then around 11 o'clock rolls around, and her ride texts her that she's going to be pulling up soon in about 20 minutes. So we gather her things and we go to walk outside, and immediately opening my door and stepping out into the hallway, we both stop and just stare down the hall at the door at the end of the hall, because we could see that the light was on under the door. Before I even walked down the hallway, we went all the way out to the front door, and I looked out to make sure that none of the cars were here, that nobody had came home and we didn't know about it. And they weren't, nobody was home yet, it was still just us. And so very slowly, I walked up to the door. I did not want to, but I walked up to it and I tried the door handle, and it was still locked. And so again, we looked at each other, very confused. We still really hadn't said anything up to this point. And then you could hear that the TV was on in the room. We started listening, and we could hear what we thought were voices, and then we realized that it was the TV. And so it was like somebody was just chilling in the room, but it was still completely locked. And then I went out to go wait. When she left, I didn't go back inside. I waited outside for my family to get back, which only took about like 10 minutes, thank God. But I went out and I waited with my dog. I was not going back inside by myself. And when they got home and we walked back inside, the light was off, everything was off, like nothing even happened.
Yeah, that room's creepy.
So this is the spirit, the dark entity that resides here, that we have now caught a couple of times over the last week or two. I named him Chester. I really don't know where the name came from or why it popped into my head.
I know, I don't either. It just it's weird.
It fit, and it never went away, but it's just what we called him was Chester. That's his name. But there's the back room at the end of the hall, which is, like, it's got the computer, a couch, and extra TV. It's just like an extra sitting room in the house, and then, I'm not going to say that word.
It's a man cave.
That's what my dad calls it. But that's his room. That's where most of his activity tends to come from. That's where he lingers. That's where he goes to hide to. So that's Chester's room. So there's that about that room, which is why that's creepy and coincidental that that's where a lot of experiences have happened, but always behind closed doors. Like with the light and stuff being on, but the door was locked. It's like he lives in there like normal. One time I thought, and I think I've talked about this in a previous video on the channel, I used to stay up fairly late when I was a teenager, and so it was like 4:30 in the morning, and I'm sitting in my room, and I hear my grandma's door open from across the hall, which I think I might have told you about this too, when I thought that she was losing it for a minute. But I heard my grandma's door open from across the hall, and each door has like its own sound, and each person in the household has their own footstep, like the way that they walk, and so I was pretty good at being able to tell which door it was and who was walking around. And I really did think that it was my grandma from like it was like a slow, shuffled kind of walking, which would be like my grandma, but I heard the door open, and then I heard her go into the kitchen, and I'm sitting there, I'm just listening, and at first I wasn't like paying attention, because it was like, yeah, I heard her, but it's like I'm minding my own business, she's just out there. But then I really started listening and like trying to hear what she was doing when I started to hear cabinets from all across the kitchen start to open, like one after the other, but way quicker than she would be able to move across the room on her own. It was like open, shut, open, shut, open, shut. The fridge opened and shut. The back door opened and shut. Like, I heard another cabinet, and then it stopped, and I'm like trying to imagine, there's no way, like, first of all, what is she looking for? Like, she can't move that fast. Why would you just open and shut everything really quick? Like, there's no reason for any of it. And so I was already confused, and I continue to listen, and I hear her go into the living room, and I hear the remote get picked up off the table, and I hear the TV come on. And then she walks back down the hall and goes back in her room and closes the door again. And so I'm sitting in my room like, is she losing it? Did this woman really just get up at 4 in the morning to open everything in the house, turn the TV on, and go back to bed? I was very confused. And I woke up the next morning, and my grandma said that the only time she got out of bed was around 3 o'clock to go to the bathroom, which I also heard. And it wasn't, she didn't get up again, she says. The TV was on, though, when we all woke up, which my dad thought was her, and so he reprimanded my grandma for leaving the TV on all night. And she swears that she didn't do it. And then that same day, this is why my dad is a hardcore skeptic, which is why we've never told him that there's things that go on in his home, because, I mean, we've tried. There's been a couple of times when I've tried to make him a believer, but he doesn't. He's had experiences that I know of, so I know that he's just choosing to block it out and deny everything and pretend like it's not there. That's his way of dealing with it, and that's fine. So he doesn't believe any of this stuff. He denies having any experiences, and any experiences he does have, he writes off as it's the house setting, or one time he told me that the double knocking that came periodically, like every 30 seconds all night long one night, was from moisture in the wood with heat causes it to expand or something like that, and that was his explanation for that. Stuff like that. So we don't really bother him too much with it. But yeah, and then after that morning also, I don't know how he found an explanation for this in his head, because there isn't one. There just fucking isn't one. We have stainless steel appliances in my dad's kitchen, and there was footprints, like about yay big, maybe like 10-year-old child size footprints, walking down the front of the fridge. Barefoot footprints. First of all, there's no children that live in this home. Secondly, how would somebody walk up the fridge going up, let alone coming from the top to the bottom? But somehow there was still a logical explanation for that in his mind.
Yeah, your dad saw that, right?
Yeah, he did. And I'm like, Dad, the only way that that an actual person could have put their fucking bare-ass footprints on your fridge is if somebody picked them up over their shoulder and held them up while they put their footprints there, because nobody can physically do that.
Well, what did he say?
I don't even remember what his reaction was.
There's nothing you can even really...
He literally just... I think he chose to switch subjects and just go into how mad he was that his stainless steel furniture was all messed up, and he just started polishing it away so that he didn't have to look at it. Like, there's being a skeptic and there's being in denial, and my dad dances on that line daily. Like, I don't know how he lives in this home in such peace. I don't get it.
I don't get any of them do.
Well, my stepmom's told us about stuff. Like, the other day, she came up to us and she told us, right before they went on a week drive up to Washington, which I was really nervous about just because anything happened. And so I was worried about it, and I was talking to my brother that had passed the night before, and I asked him to please make sure that they're safe. Like, don't let anything happen to them, like, you know, that kind of thing. And then she tells me that morning before they leave, she's like, I'm going to tell her. And my dad tried to tell her, well, no, don't worry about it. Like, he didn't even want me to know about it because he knows that he's the only one that's trying to just be like, oh, no, it didn't happen. Just hush, hush about it. But she pulls me into the room, into their bedroom to tell me that all night long they heard this. On the side of one of their dressers, and conveniently enough, like, I didn't even realize it when she was telling me. At first, my first thought went to Chester when she said that she was hearing noises. Like, I wasn't surprised at all about paranormal activity, but I didn't realize what it was until she told me. And then she goes, but look, and she points to the top of this dresser. The dresser's about my height, so it's pretty tall, and it's where they keep my brother's ashes, like a little urn for him and stuff is up there. And so I think that it's really ironic that the night after, or the morning after, I was asking him to be with them on this trip and make sure that they're safe, that right underneath his urn they were getting knocks all night long. So that's one thing, and so she notices it, and that was when my dad tried to use the heat moisture excuse with the wood. So that very next night we ended up setting an EVP recorder up in their room on that dresser, and we got exactly what she was describing, knocks from all over the room. I even heard like the jingling noises from that, from the handles on the dresser, like the metal handles, shadows that we've seen of her. But on the recording that we took that night when we got the knocks, we had a few different times where you could hear like a woman's voice. We're not able to make out what it is. It's very muffled, but it does come about a couple of times. And the very first knock that we got on that recording, the first one that came, was really aggressive. And we didn't get another one that was as loud as that, but it was like somebody just like bang on the side of something.
Cousin or your nephew?
My nephew. He was 3 years old at the time.
Yeah, and we're just sitting in her room, and I was laying on the bed, and he's like playing with his cars or something.
On the carpet next to my bed, yeah.
Yeah, like right by the hallway, and then
he starts saying the word ghosts to himself while he's playing, over and over again. And I asked you, I was like, what is he saying? Like, we were trying to figure out, like, he can't be saying ghosts. Like, he's 3, where would he even have heard that? Like, kids' shows don't say it. His parents are not going to talk to him about ghosts. It made no sense why this little boy should be saying ghosts repeatedly. And then...
Yeah, because the door was open, and then, so I'm just laying there, and he gets up and just goes and shuts the door, and then she's all, well, no, you can't do that, you gotta leave it open, and he goes, hides the ghost, and we're both just like, what the fuck?
And then he went back and started playing with his toys again. He just got up, like, he wasn't acting scared at all. Like, this was totally normal for him. He just got up mid-play session, didn't look at either of us, walks over to the door, hides the ghost, and then goes back and plays with his cars again, and we're both just sitting on the bed like...
Yeah, I was like, what did he just say?
Like, hide who? Who did you see standing at the door? Like,
obviously it was Chester, it had to have been, or that girl.
Somebody. Like, I feel like it was the woman because he wasn't scared. Like, he was very calm about it, or maybe he was too young to... I don't know. But when he was 5, let's fast forward 2 years later, we're having a family barbecue out here, and I had came over to be a part of that, and we're sitting on the back porch, and he had to go inside to go to the bathroom, and he goes to walk in the back door, and he got about 2 feet in the door, and he comes back outside and closes the door behind him, and he gets my stepmom, and he says, Grandma, you have to come inside with me. And she's like, well, why? He said, because there's a monster in there. And she's like, well, there's not a monster in there, you know, just trying to, like, reassure the kid like you do. And his whole demeanor changed immediately when she told him this. He just got very serious and was very adamant about the fact that yes there is, and he kept saying it until she agreed with him. And everybody else just thought, oh, you know, he's 5, it's his imagination. I'm the only one remembering past events sitting there like because apparently he still remembers, or he still sees them, and that time I think it was Chester, because he was too afraid to go inside by himself.
Yeah.
So
that's creepy.
I can't tell you how many times our animals have been growling at nothing and staring off into space, which if you know anything about paranormal activity, you know that animals are very susceptible to that. Their spirit radar is way higher than ours is. They see and hear things that we cannot, and so when your animal's trying to tell you something, listen, because they know what they see.
Yeah, and if a little kid tells you there's a ghost or a monster, you believe that
or they have an imaginary friend,
no,
they might not be so imaginary. I'm just saying. Like, I'm not saying that every case of imaginary friend is, oh, they're talking to dead people, but there is a great possibility that in that innocent stage of life, they're susceptible enough to see those things and not be afraid of it because they don't know a dead person from a living person because they're too young, simply. So that's all it is. And so when a child has that innocence, ghosts wander to that because they can be seen, they can be heard. And unfortunately, there is times when negative spirits are attracted to children because their innocence is seen as a vessel for possession, which is something that nobody wants to deal with, but that's a lot less common also. But yeah.